Okay. Now that's all good discussion. Today, I thought there was a couple of things that we could try to accomplish. We could try to hook up to the API itself. We could try to do some like material UI or whatever kind of front end UI framework we might want to plug into this thing, and then maybe just build like something small to like view the blogs and then add one. I also today just kind of went and added a couple additional methods here and a couple additional domains. So you can get all blogs, you can get a blog by an ID, you can create a blog, and then you can create a post as well. And then in the API for the domain itself, I just added for a post can have a list of comments, which are just pretty straightforward. So I thought, I was hoping to maybe spend 15 minutes or something at the end of this meeting, and maybe if we get the app to a point where we could start doing stuff, and if people were interested in, building a piece of this, I know I got some private messages saying, hey, I'd like to, take this and start building something on it. That maybe we could divvy that up at the end of the call, or schedule something for tomorrow for like a half hour to like talk about what we learned to do. How's that sound?
Sounds good, yeah.
Perfect. So do we want to start by kind of hooking into the API today? I think that's kind of like where we left things yesterday. If you remember, we had this kind of blogs example, and we were just kind of throwing some dummy data here on the client. And then we said use effect, and we were just setting blogs with that blog example. But what we can do is actually tie that back to the API and then kind of set up any kind of cores or anything that's needed. So why don't we start there? Is there anything before we get started that anybody wants to talk about from yesterday's session, or any previous stuff? And is everybody kind of caught up and understand where we are?
I'll just say there was a few things that I kind of wanted just to we didn't really touch on, or maybe just got a little missed it, but just so everybody knows, with the deconstruction, I was talking to John, like you can do that in the parameters itself on the props when it's passed in. So like you don't necessarily have to, so you can do it straight in the parameter list if you want to do the deconstruction there and not set up a separate statement underneath. Yep. So like that one, John could simply do in there. And just on the key, if the key always has to be on the outer element of whatever you're doing. Right. So that includes a fragment. So if you're wrapping something in a fragment, the fragment, you would actually put the key on the fragment tag element. So I just wanted to make sure that. And then I think DJ's confusion about the way of doing things, we don't have to talk about this today, but if anybody's interested, you can go to the React documentation. There's a difference between what's called controlled components and uncontrolled components. So what John was doing was a controlled component, which basically means React is the source of truth for everything. And then there's also something called uncontrolled components that you can do that involves refs and stuff. So just wanted to bring those up.
Yeah, so I don't think I've ever written an uncontrolled component, but maybe if we find some sort of use case, or we can make something up, maybe we can demo that if there's some value.
I just wanted to say I put a link in the chat. Him doesn't look interested, but it kind of walks through what React is doing under the hood and how React works. He goes through and builds like a simpler React, and the website's pretty cool. If you scroll, it'll like show the code that's relevant and kind of animate changes that are relative with the text. So it's a pretty cool website. But if you're interested in how React's kind of working, then
and it's written in React, which is the most important thing. Mm-hmm. If you're gonna do a website on how React works.
You can see that the React tools lit up here when we went here. Very cool. Yeah, I'll definitely take a look at that too. All right. Well, for now, what I think we'll do is we'll connect out to the API, and instead of getting the blogs from here, we will just pull them back from the API. And we're going to run into a couple of issues with that. The first thing we're going to run into is a CORS issue, which is like the cross-site scripting attacks that can potentially happen. So what we ultimately have to say is, since this API is running on, or sorry, the client's running on port 1234 on localhost, and the API is running on localhost 44360, those hosts don't match, so therefore you can't make browser requests, client requests out to the server API because the hosts are different. Even though it's localhost, those ports have to be the same. So it'd be like no different than me trying to connect out to, like something at work, maybe like the AD web service or something like that. You might have to get somebody to enable CORS for you. So we're going to run into that. So what we'll probably start with is building out the API call. We'll see that we're going to get the CORS error, and then we'll go resolve that in the API itself. For this, I'm thinking I'm going to use Axios as the library to make the HTTP calls. I'm relatively familiar with it. I like the syntax of it. We could also use the built-in fetch API and just vanilla JavaScript. If anybody has a strong opinion on something else, feel free to speak up and we can try that as well. Have you guys had some success using Axios in the past? Anybody know what that is or used it before?
Yeah, I like it. Used it with Vue.
Okay.
Yeah, I've used it before.
Okay, cool. And then I was talking with Ryan offline a little bit a couple of days ago, and at some point maybe we'll come back here and maybe add some GraphQL into this as well, and we can kind of maybe compare and contrast the differences there. One of the things that you'll see as we go writing some of this stuff, we might end up with a lot of, get all blogs, get blog by ID, get all posts, get post by ID, and you end up writing a lot of code on the back end to kind of handle all of that stuff, where GraphQL can kind of help out by building out some schemas and kind of handling that data a little bit differently by kind of getting the data that you want when you request it. So more to come there, maybe in a couple of weeks. All right, so I'm going to start, I guess, by adding, I'm going to stop our server for a second, and I'm going to add Axios into here. So I'm just going to do npm install Axios. And I think that's all I need. All right, so now that that is installed, we should be able to use it. So I'm just going to kind of spin back up our app and just get rid of the terminal. So what we're going to need is we're going to have to import Axios from Axios, and that's going to give us the Axios client that we can use to call back to our API. So I'm also going to at least attempt to use the async methods within here. So what I'm going to do is create a method to go get the blogs. So I'm going to say just get blogs maybe. And we'll say this is an async method. And we'll just make a arrow function like that. So this kind of works the same way if you're familiar with async and await within .NET, but there are some differences. Actually, I'm still trying to trying to wrap my head around some of the differences, but in general, it operates in that similar way that .NET does. So we'll see some of the maybe differences here as we go along. So what we want to do is make a call using Axios. So we can say something like const response equals await Axios. Should just be able to do like a .get. And I think this will take a generic as well. So I can say I want to get a blog model. All right. And then I can pass it the URL that I want. So we can come back here to Swagger, and we can see what this URL is somewhere. So it'll just be localhost, our port, and then /blog/getAll. So I'm going to do that blog/get log. And then we can pass it an optional config object. I don't think we're going to need any config right now, but if you were going to be passing along like your Windows auth or something like that, you can say with config. You actually get an IntelliSense on this, with credentials rather, and you can set that to true, and it's going to handle passing the credentials along. You can see all the other things that we could configure within here. But for now, I don't think we need anything. This is also a place where you could set headers. Maybe if you had a token or something that you needed to pass along in the header, you could set it here as well. So that should be enough to get a response back, and it's smart enough to know that that response is an Axios response of blog model, right? So at this point, we should be able to say our data could be response.data, which it now is going to know that that is just the blog model array. And then once we call get blogs, we could do this a couple of different ways. We could return the list at this point, or we could just go ahead and say set blogs. So that's what I'm going to do at this point. So I'm not going to set another variable here, but I'm just going to have set blogs, and I'm going to set it to the response data. And then in order to call this, instead of calling set blogs here, I think I can just say get blogs. And then that's going to go ahead and call our method. And remember, useEffect is going to fire one time right now as the application or as this component mounts. So if I didn't screw up any of the syntax here, I think that's going to work. So before we run it, any questions on just kind of the general setup and Axios or async await, any of that? So if I do go ahead and run this, it's not working. And we're getting an error. Let's see. Regenerator runtime is not defined. Anybody seen that one before? It's telling us line 26 we have an issue. Let's go take a look. So it's obviously something in here that we have messed up. I am not seeing the problem. See if I comment all that out if it works again. Ryan or Chris or anybody else, have you seen that before? Have you seen that error?
I have not, and I don't see anything wrong either. Trying to think what it could be.
Kind of set these side by side, and we'll kind of. Why is it different? There. Let's see if we save that. Okay, so it's something within our definition here because it's not even being called. So that's an async method. We're awaiting the response.
What was the error? Runtime regeneration or something like that?
Regenerator runtime is not defined. We can try. Are you Googling that?
That almost sounds like you're missing an import or something that could import it.
Yeah. I thought that was going to be a really simple little example.
Looks like it might be something with like your setup.
Oh, and parcel, did I mess something up there?
Either there or maybe like your TS config or something like that.
I think that's all right.
Okay.
Well, oh, I think it is something with the async call. I might have to. Does Chrome? I'm not sure Chrome supports. Here's what I think I need to do. I think I need to give it a browser list. So are you guys familiar with how browser list works in a package.json file? You can kind of specify the browsers that you want to support, and then I believe it'll kind of polyfill the last.
Yeah, I think you're right. On here.
Say that again.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is right. From what I see, it's browsers list though. I think.
Browsers list.
Yeah, just like that.
So still getting an error. Let's see if we do last one, Edge versions. I think it is something to do with the async await there that I don't have correct. You can even go back to IE11. Although I do think you need some other React polyfills to do that. That might be something I need to plug in is one of the React polyfills for that.
Oh, I wonder, John, you said you were targeting ES 20 something, maybe 2018. Maybe that's a bit high.
That should work. Sorry, guys. I thought this would be kind of the joys of doing this stuff live. The other thing we could try, I know there's some like the React app polyfill, if you guys are familiar with that. I might try to add that real quick and see if that fixes it. I'm going to install React app polyfill. I think that's the name of it. Yeah, I think it is. And then
But you're doing this in Chrome, so I don't think it would be a polyfill issue.
I tend to agree. I'm just trying to think of other things that I've done in the past to get that to work. I'm just going to try it real quick. If I do, you can then just import into the entire app. I can import like React app polyfill slash stable. Try that. I think it's an issue with the async and await. I can do it with like kind of chaining together the thens and catches and stuff like that. Yeah, that's interesting.
That'd fix it.
It did. I will take a note to research that and try to get back to you. I don't want to waste all of our time here. But I remember vaguely running into that in the past with async await and needing a polyfill for that to work. Maybe with TypeScript in particular. I'm not doing that justice, so I'm not going to guess. I'll look that up and get back to us on it.
Here's a GitHub issue I found. It has a couple different things if you want to use that for reference. But
yeah, do you mind throwing that in the chat?
Yeah.
Perfect. So async await is relatively new in JavaScript. The last year or two, I think, maybe 3. It seems to have kind of caught on a lot more over the last year, at least in some of the blogs and things that I've read.
The odd thing, though, is you're targeting ES 2018, and async await should work in ES 2017. So, and actually, it's probably in ES 6. So, I don't know why.
I don't think it's in ES 6. I think it was an ES 7 thing. But, yeah, I'm not entirely sure. But if I do call this now, probably going to get the cores issue.
But I think Chrome should support it either way. I mean,
I agree, and I have
at
the
this
latest version
point,
of Chrome and everything, so I don't know. For now, I'm going to keep the polyfill in there. So just to kind of just briefly recap, I just added React app polyfill, and then in app, I just added React app polyfill stable, and it's going to, when it builds everything for us in the app.js file, it's going to add some additional things in here in order to support async and await. I'm not going to try searching through here and seeing what it did, but it would have added some more code there for the browser to run. Yeah, sorry I don't have like a great answer for that right now. But moving on, we'll circle back to that. But for now, let's kind of focus on like getting the cores figured out. So what I did was we have this async method where we're going to set the blogs when I get the response back, and in use effect I called get blogs. And now we come over here and you see that there aren't any blogs. But you will see in the console that it's saying it's being blocked by cores policy. So what we have to do, and I can zoom in on this, what we have to do is go back to the API and say, yeah, we're going to allow the API to call that. So it's pretty straightforward in .NET Core. There's a couple of things that we want to do. The first one that we want to do is configure services here, and we're going to set up cores. So what we can do here is just say services dot add cores, and we're going to give it some options. And then in here it's options dot add policy, and you have to give every policy a name. So I'm just going to call this like local cores policy. And we can come back and maybe do that a little bit better later. And then it takes a second parameter, which is the policy itself. So there's multiple ways that we can write the policy. I'm just going to do one inline here using like a policy builder. So what we're going to do is just say this builder. We could do allow any method. So that would say allow get, post, put, delete, anything that we want. We can say builder.allow any header. So we can allow any of the headers to come through. We can say builder.allow credentials, maybe, if we wanted to allow credentials to pass through. I'm not going to worry about that one right now. And then what we could do is say builder.allow any origin. And that would allow any origin to come through. But just for the sake of a training exercise here, what you would probably do in a real-life application is list out any origins that you would want to have access to this. So for now we can just say with origins instead of allow all origins, and we'll allow HTTP, what was it, localhost. I think we're on port 1234. So that is just some very basic configuration to add cores or to configure cores. So now what we need to do in the configure itself is use cores. And in fact, I only really want to do that if I'm in development. Otherwise, I don't want it to use cores, because our idea here is going to be when we host it, at least for right now, we're going to host it maybe all in the same app service or on the same URL, in which case the cores wouldn't really be an issue. So here what we can do is say app.useCores, and then this is where you need to give it that policy name. So what we did up here is call it like local cores policy. In fact, what I might do in a case like this would be something like adding a const, calling it local cores policy. And you know, again, it doesn't matter what it is, but then you're going to get IntelliSense on this, and you're not going to screw up. You're not going to screw up the naming or anything like that. So pretty much the same thing, but just a helpful little trick. So if I build our API again, and I come back to here, and I'm just going to refresh it. So now we're actually getting the blogs back from the API. And if you don't believe me, we can come over to the network tab, and we should see get all here, and here is the actual result of everything coming back. Any questions up until that point? Is that all relatively familiar with you guys? Have you done, I'm sure, an Angular and Vue, and any kind of front end that you're talking to a back end? If you're not on that same port, you've had to deal with some sort of cores issues, unless you're hosting that all together.
I just want to say at work, cores and Windows authentication do not play well together, and you kind of have to jump through some hoops to get this to work.
So that's a good, a decent segue. So I actually, it's funny we're writing this little blog app, but on my little My Site thing at work, I did post exactly how to handle that. And I do happen to have that code over here because I did transfer some of that stuff over. One of the things that I ended up writing, and I'll drag it over here, was the idea of a cores middleware. So the idea here, I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but every time that you do a post request, and we'll see this in a minute too when we go to create a blog, it sends like a pre-flight check, which uses the options verb in HTTP. But that doesn't come through with any authentication, right? So in your Windows authentication doesn't come through with that. So I wrote this little small piece of middleware that you can say use cores anonymously. And what it will do is say, hey, if you're authenticated, well, fine, just go to the next thing. Or if it's an options verb, go to the next thing. Otherwise, if it's not, go ahead and challenge, and it will enforce the Windows authentication to happen. So I don't have the entire blog post here, but I did write that up at work. That goes into pretty good detail about what Ryan's talking about. That's a really good comment, Ryan. It's kind of annoying at work with Windows auth. Any other questions before we move on? All right. So the next thing that we might do here is maybe we want to show that there's a couple of paths we can go here. We can maybe show like a loading thing while that's loading, or we could handle any errors that we might get back from the server. Maybe we'll do both. So I'll remove this blogs example because we just don't need that anymore. And we have Git blogs here, but maybe we want to show loading while while it's going out to get this, and we can kind of simulate that by maybe setting a breakpoint or something in our get all logic, and we can just kind of see that it's going to be loading. So maybe what we'll do is we'll just do this all manually, and then we can see how we can make this kind of all better and encapsulate some of this into like some reusable custom hooks or something maybe at the end of this. So if we want to capture that something's loading, maybe we have a variable called isLoading and setIsLoading. And again, we'll use state, and we'll make this a bool, and we'll set it false by default. And what we can do in here is when we call set blogs, we can say set isLoading to true, and after we get a response back, we can set isLoading to false. And what we can do down here is instead of showing all of the blogs, we can determine whether it's loading or not. And if it's loading, we can show some sort of loading indicator. Maybe for now we'll just show some text. Otherwise, we'll render everything out. So how's that syntax going to look? We might do kind of an inline ternary for this. So we can do isLoading. What's the best way to do that, guys? If we can maybe do like, if it's loading, we can return the blogs. Otherwise, return loading. Do I need that to be in parentheses or the braces? I get that confused sometimes.
Braces for. Oh, it shouldn't matter for what do you mean, like the UL or?
Yeah, like if I just wanted to do, I think I have the logic backwards, but. So if it's loading, I want to show loading. Otherwise, I want it to go show all the blogs. I think I got that right. So if I refresh this, you might see it say loading real quick, but let's see if we can simulate it a little bit better. So within here, and we'll go to our blog controller, and we can just simply maybe set up breakpoint and get all. And we'll start this with debugging. and we'll come back to our app and we'll refresh this, and you should be able to see how it says loading here. So you can envision this being a nice little loading animation or something like that. And as we step through and we go ahead and say continue on this, let's see if I can kind of do these side by side. You'll see that the loading goes away and the results come back. Make sense?
Also, in Chrome DevTools, you can make a Chrome run with a super slow network, and that would also simulate it.
Oh, okay. I'm not super familiar with that. So is that easy to do?
Yeah. So if you just open Chrome DevTools, no, so you would do it on the front end actually. Yeah.
Yep.
If you go to, let's see where it's at. Hit the little device in the top left. I believe it's under here.
It kind of made this over here.
Yes. If you do that, there should be somewhere that you can select to have it run on a slower network. Where it's at exactly now.
Oh, that's interesting.
Let me find it.
I was thinking maybe it'd be on the network tab here.
You can keep going. I'll find it.
Okay, no, that's interesting though. So it looks like Chrome gives us some tools to also kind of simulate that, which isn't surprising. Their dev tools are pretty good. But what if we get an error back, right? And we want to handle, we want to handle that error. So right now, let's just go back to our, you know what we'll do? We'll just like turn the API off altogether, right? So maybe the API is down. Well, what's going to happen? Well, just kind of get stuck in this loading state, right? And if we come over here, we can see that failed. We can see that we don't have any data that came back. But maybe we want to alert the user of that. And furthermore, maybe we want to alert the user with some custom errors or something at some point as well. So another thing that we can do here is we would create another set of variables here using state. We could say errors or error. We could say set error. Again, use state. This will just be a string, and we'll set it as an empty string at first. So what's nice about async and await is we can just kind of use what we're used to with try-catch blocks, which is pretty nice. So we can now say just try, and what are we going to try? Well, maybe we'll put all of this in the try. We're going to say set is loading, get the response, and we want to set the blogs when we get the response back. And then we can have a catch where we get an exception back. And here is maybe where we want to set the error to has error. We can come back and make that a little bit more robust. And that also gives us a nice finally block that we can say set is loading to false. I could have put the set is loading in the try and then in the catch, but the finally is going to make sure that runs every time. So at this point we should have an error because it wasn't successful, and we can come down here and we can write some code that might say if we have an error, then we want to display let's see, /div. We want to maybe display the error itself. So see here where it says has error, because that's exactly what we set at this point. Now I think I might be able to get the actual message off of this thing. I'll be able to send the whole exception in. So it's loading.
Yeah, John, the throttling under the network tab, you'll see a thing that says online.
Okay. We'll check that out in just a second here. I think I can do error, and then I can give this, is it error or exception? I don't remember what the TypeScript is for that. I thought it might have been exception. I can look it up real quick.
not positive, but I don't think you can cast in the caps block.
Yeah, you might be right. Might be lowercase message too. I might have that wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see that doesn't exist. In my dev tools here, I should probably have something that says, here's the connection refused. I'm surprised it didn't blow up on this. Yeah, so it's lowercase m for message. So here we get the actual network error message back. So, that's one way that we could handle this. I don't know if we want to get into all this right now, but what we could do is say when you called this, we just throw a new exception, my custom exception. We're probably not going to get that error message back, but we should be able to see it at least in the network tab. So if we refresh that, here we just get that it was failed with status code 500. Which might be something you want to show the end user anyway. But in the network tab, I think we may actually get the entire stack trace and everything, because that's what's being returned as part of the developer exception page. So what we could do is we could write kind of some simple custom middleware to handle any exceptions that happen, convert that back to some sort of useful JSON, and then handle that more globally. We can certainly do that if that's of interest. Where do you guys want to take it from here? We could get into some more robust exception handling. We could style out our blogs a little bit more. We could do a post to actually create a blog and then have it show back up in the blog list. Kind of open to suggestion.
I like the post and then have it show up.
Okay. So let's do that. So we have our create method. So we got to figure out, where we want to do that. So we have this add blog method. So we'll probably just we'll do that. So you're going to kind of see this component might get a little large, and maybe it'll be a good chance to go refactor some of that. But we know right now for a blog what we need is an owner, right? So we can come out and look at our Swagger page again, make this full screen for a minute, and we can see in order to create a blog I need a title and I need an owner. So we can do that. So let's go ahead, and we already have our owner. So let's go ahead and start by saying we also need a title, right? So we're going to have title and set title. And by default, it'll just be an empty string. And then down in our input right here, we'll make this maybe a little bit better, a little bit easier to read. We'll just kind of maybe have a div tag that has, just moving a couple of things around, has an input span that just says this is the owner. So that will look like that. I'm going to get rid of this. Create another div for, I'm going to copy this code, and we're going to have the actual title. And this is going to be our title. And we're going to call set title. And then, this doesn't look great, obviously. Maybe we'll come back and we'll add a nice UI framework or something on top of this. But you get the idea. You have an owner, a title, and an add blog button. So up in our add blog, there's a couple of different ways that we can handle this. We can create another kind of just simple method for doing the API call. In reality, I'd probably abstract this out into like an API class or another just TypeScript file that I could say, api.getBlogs or something like that. And maybe we'll do that towards the end of this. So when we want to add a blog, we have our new blog model, but we don't necessarily want a blog model at this point, right? We want whatever this thing expects, which is just a title and an owner. So I'm going to do it with just some anonymous types right now. So let's just comment that out for a minute. What we're going to do is just create, actually I think we can just do all this inline for now. So we're going to do const response, because remember we're going to get the ID back at some point. We should be able to say await Axios dot post, and then what URL are we at? Well, we're going to be very similar to this, except it's going to be blog/create. The second parameter wants the data. So for the data, I'm going to say we have a title. That's going to be the title. And I have an owner. That's going to be the owner. So owner, what I'm doing here is just creating a property called title using the title variable that we created using the set state. Same with owner. And what else is this one? Just the config. I don't think we need any config. So now that we have the response, that should do the post itself. Then we want the blog ID back. So if we do const blog ID should be response. So I think here we know that that's going to return a number. So we can tell it that. So data coming back, the blog ID should be a number. And I'm going to make this function async. And for now, I'm not going to set anything here, but I am going to set the owner and title back to empty. So then we'll see how we can get it to refresh. Let's make sure it actually works. So if I add owner, who doesn't have one now? Matt. Title. Matt's. Marvelous. I can't spell that. Matt's blog. And we'll call add blog. And if everything worked, when I refresh this page, we should see that it actually did show up here. But maybe what we want to do is have it show up right away when we add that blog, right? So there's a couple of different ways we could handle this. One, we could go back to the API and just requery everything. Or two, we can click add blog, and then we can say set blogs and do what we were doing previously. For those of you that have done this before, what's kind of been your preference for stuff like that? Have you handled that like in Vue or Angular or any other kind of app as well?
So for stats, we've done it a little bit of both.
Sure.
We've done some state management and some straight querying.
Yep.
And state management is nice when it's simple.
Yep.
But if you're dealing with complex stuff and nested objects, it is more trouble than it's worth to just keep updating the state.
Yeah, so I'm glad you put it that way, because like in my experience doing this stuff, it like everything, it kind of depends, right? It depends on your domain, what you're working with, how responsive you need it to be. If requerying all the blogs takes 10 seconds, maybe that's not appropriate, right? So maybe what we can do is walk through both ways of doing it, and then we can kind of maybe pick which way we like better for this case. So if I was to do it just strictly kind of state-based, what I can do is almost copy exactly what we had before. So I want to create a new blog model. The blog ID isn't going to be random though, because we've gotten it back from the actual API. The owner is going to be whatever owner was here. We don't have a title here yet. We can go add that in a minute. And the created date, that's also interesting because we don't necessarily have the created date here. So we wouldn't necessarily have one, which is interesting. But for now, I'll just say new date because maybe for the sake of this, it's that's acceptable. So what we can do then is kind of just going back to exactly what we had before. And when we go do this, we'll give DJ a blog, and we'll click add. And what you should see is, one, it went and added it to the database, but then it also just automatically added it to our blogs here. Does that make sense, everyone? So that is one way of doing it. You can see if I actually go hard refresh the page, that's also going to come back. Another way we could do this is we could get creative and maybe add something to the use effect. So when we click the add blog button and it succeeds, that we have it re-trigger that. Or we could explicitly call get blogs again if we really wanted to as well. So we can kind of explore maybe the different ways of doing that. So if we didn't like this way, and we said, okay, it was successful, so I'm actually going to add a little bit of try-catch logic around here, just like we did the other one. So I want to try to do that. I want to catch any exceptions that might happen. So only if it was successful do I want to clear out the owner and the title. I feel like I missed something. Right here. So then we won't need that here. And then if we catch any exceptions, again we can call our set error message that we had and set it to ex.message. So again, if like the API was down or something and I click add blog, we should see the network error. So we, just to prove that, we could do that really quick. So if I come in here and try to, add that, we should get the error when it actually comes back. We could do the whole loading thing and everything else here as well. Say, network error. Let's spin that back up. Have to bring our app back online. We could add validation to this. We could add, any kind of server-side validation that came back. We could handle that here as well. But what we were going to say is when we added that, we were going to then call get blog again. So you could call add blog. If that was successful, you could just call get blogs again. So if we did that, we should be able to say, who doesn't have one yet? Chris. And it's going to go re-query everything and pull all that back down. So anyway, I think you're getting the point. There's multiple ways that you can go about doing that. Any questions on any of that? Is there a way that you prefer in this example over the others? Is that making sense, guys?
Makes sense to me.
Okay. So that's kind of the basics of kind of calling the API, both the GET and the POST. That's probably 99% of what you're going to do. Now, granted, we didn't get any kind of error handling or anything like that. There's some ways that we could abstract, probably calling set loading and setting errors, and so you don't have this kind of code in every one of your components that you would, go build. So maybe as we build a couple of these out, we can find some nice themes to go refactor some of that stuff.
Makes sense.
Cool. So where to next? What makes sense? Do you want to bring in like a UI library and kind of make that look a little bit nicer?
Sure.
Okay. Is that DJ? You on the call?
No, that's Tim.
Oh, it's Tim.
That was my DJ impression.
It was very good.
Oh, come on. I don't sound like that.
That's a better DJ impression right there.
That's still Tim.
Nice.
Sorry I'm late, guys. I had to clean up Tim's mess at work, so
That makes total sense. Yeah.
yeah.
All right. So I have some familiarity with the Material UI theme or UI framework. I've used a couple of other ones, but not to the extent of Material. I know, speaking with a couple of you at work, that some others are familiar with that. How do you guys like that library overall, for those of you that have used it?
It's all right in Angular. Yeah, it's not too bad.
Okay.
I like in it that you can pretty much override anything you want and make it look the way you want if it's, something that you don't like or whatever the case is. So
Yeah, I agree. So I have found it to be a little verbose, I guess, but because of that verboseness, to your point, you can kind of do whatever you want with it, right? So if you're unfamiliar with it, here's just it's just a general layout. Here's what your buttons might look like. Here's like an app bar that we could add to the to the site. You can find text fields in here and see what your text fields are going to look like, and you just kind of get all this more or less for free out of the box, just by saying I want to use a text field instead of an input, and it's going to wrap all those HTML elements for you. So I think to get started with this, you just need to install at Material UI core. So what I'm going to do is add that into our project. But before we do that, I'm going to create a commit of what we did here. So just kind of a brief overview. We got the async await stuff working. I'm going to go back and research that. We've added a couple of fields. We now call into the API, and then in startup itself, we've added the local course policy. So I might just add a commit for this. Oh, I committed that right on a master. That wasn't great. I'm surprised it let me do that.
you can commit, you just can't push.
Yeah. So that's an interesting little Git issue right there. I want to create a new branch, but I want to pop that commit off of it. So I should be able to.
You could do undo last commit, or if you just create a new branch, it'll be on that branch.
It'll be right on that branch. Okay. So I'm just going to create a new branch from here. And I'm going to say add API and UI. That's probably what we'll do today. So now if I were to push that to the server, that commit that I had would be on there. Okay. So let me close all of this stuff. And I'm going to go back here, shut this down for a second, and I'm going to say install Material UI core. And because I know we're going to need it, I want the icons as well. So that gives us, if you're familiar with like Font Awesome or the Material icons or thousands of the other ones that are out there, it's just the icon pack that comes along with this. I think that's all we're going to need for this. All right, so now that we have those, I can spin the app back up. And we will go ahead and start to add some UI, some better UI into our app. So maybe we'll start, maybe we'll kind of start with this simple form here. And so what that's going to look like, let's see if I can get this back to where we had it before. Try to do half and half. We'll maybe start by styling this form down here so we can kind of come over to the components and we can see what we have to work with. So I know there's the idea of what they call paper, which is just this little blocky thing. So maybe we'll start with that. So I can start by just saying paper, and it should figure out where that comes from. It does take a second, but what I'm going to do is just say import paper from @material_core/ /paper. So one thing, and this is like an ES6 thing or just kind of an import thing, you could just do import paper from core, but you're going to get the entire core library, which means every time that you save, and we should be able to see this, it's going to be building and it's going to take forever to go do that, right? So that took like 3 seconds. But if I just do API/paper and I save, it took 287 milliseconds. So we're like a whole magnitude, of time shorter. So this is kind of their recommended approach to doing that. They have a pretty good guide somewhere here on getting started. I'm not going to find it right now, but it goes into like pretty good detail about like why you want to add each thing individually. But the short of it is because the build time can take a long time. I don't know if anybody else has experienced that or any other workarounds with that.
So I think if you destructure that, if you put paper in curly braces, it should be better because I do believe that they changed it to support tree shaking, so it should only import what you actually need. I don't know if you'll get better runtime there, but I do think that I know what doc you're talking about.
Yep.
I think they update it to say that they've added tree shaking.
So it's interesting. It's a combination between like tree shaking and material UI, and then tree shaking on what like parcel bundler can do.
Right. Okay. So maybe it's a partial thing.
So we'll try it like this for now. If we see that we're getting some bad results or it's taking too long, we'll refactor it the other way. So paper, what we can do then, like so just for example, if I were to wrap all of this stuff in here, we should see that we have this kind of paper thing around it. You can kind of see that. I believe there's some tags in here, so you can say like elevation, and maybe we'll give that like 5, and then you should see that, you get a little bit more shadow around that. And maybe we would want to add some padding around that. I don't remember the exact syntax for that off the top of my head. I'm not sure you can do it from right there. You might have to use some custom styling to make that happen. And there's a couple of ways that we can do that. Ryan, are you familiar with, like, I bet I could just add like a class right here, or do you think it's worth getting into the whole like use styles and make styles at this point?
So you'd have to do an inline style. There's a couple ways. Inline style, the use styles that you're talking about. You can also use, they have a block component, or box I think it's called. It's part of their system package that it kind of comes with a lot of helper stuff.
Okay.
So padding and margin and colors and that kind of stuff. So you could put that inside of the paper component.
Oh, I'm unfamiliar with that. So is it just another like tag that I could use in here?
Box.
Blocks?
Box.
Box. Yes.
Yeah. And then put everything inside that, and then in there you can do P or margin and M or whatever you want.
Oh, interesting.
You can set that based off of media queries and stuff like that too, if you wanted to get advanced. But
that's excellent. It tells me I don't have a closing paper tag, but I do. So I think I have one too many divs or something in here. Bear with me as I figure out why I went wrong. So this div is this div is this, yeah, I have one too many. However, it's not working. Do I not have to have, do I have to have something there with the box for that to work?
Just look where it imported from. I want to, maybe it imported from the wrong thing. No,
Yeah, that's right.
It should just work. See errors there?
I think I like moved this div too many is actually what I ended up doing. Like, I'm not returning the right amount of, it was just a syntax thing. Oh, great. So I have that. So really what I would want here is probably like P, and that'll just put the padding like that. That's excellent. I was unaware of that. So there you get, a nice thing that looks like that. Then we can flip back to the material UI and maybe go get the text field itself. So we can use text field. So instead of a div, we'll just do a text field. And let's see if it imported that for us, and it did. So we can say text field, and then there's a label, which we can just say is owner. And then everything else is going to be very similar here. We're going to have value, which is going to be the owner still, and then we're going to take the onChange event. I'm just going to cut this from here, paste it here, and then remove this whole div. So now back in our app, we have something that looks, a bit nicer here for owner, and then we can do the same thing for title. We can delete that. So now we have. So I want those to be up and down. I want them to go like that. I forget exactly how to do that. I mean, I might just be able to add like a break or something in there, but I think what I could do is like use a grid in like a container. So it also provides the idea of a grid. And then the highest level grid would be the container. And then within each of these, we can have a grid item, I think is the syntax for that. So then I can take this and put it in here, and then I can make another one item and put our text field in that. And I think it's because I need to give that a direction or something. And this is just kind of looking at the docs, and I've played around with this a little bit. I think it might be align items.
I think it might be direction column.
Maybe that's what I'm doing wrong. Yep, that was all it was. So again, just another way of doing that. For those of you familiar with like Bootstrap's grid system, it's kind of similar, although I think it's under the hood it's a bit different. But you can do things like set your breakpoints at like mid or small or extra large and all of that, and you can set the numbers there. And I think it's a 12 column grid system like Bootstrap was or is. Yeah, it appears to be. So is everybody relatively familiar with how that works like in Bootstrap? It's very similar here from my experience.
Yep.
Cool. So you can see like, any of these UI frameworks that you add, it adds a bit more syntax to the whole thing. But you get, much nicer looking actions here. So the last thing we'll do is we'll go add the button to this. So we'll just do maybe this contain button. It's going to copy it. We'll add it to the grid too. Item. We have a button, contain, and this is where we would just say, the same thing, add blog, and on click. Not find name button. So now we have that, and we can give this some margin or something too if we wanted. Ryan, can I just add like another box in here? Is that like kind of the accepted approach on this?
Yep.
So if I added another box, and then maybe we give it like can I do like margin bottom, or in this case top of like 2. And then here you can give them different colors too. So maybe if we want color and we want that to be like primary, that'll turn it like that default blue color.
Just a small side note that the margin and padding is not pixels, if anybody was confused by that. It's actually a multiplier on their base padding, which I think is 8 or 16. I can't remember, but actually, I don't know. I don't remember what the number is, but it's a multiplier.
Good to know. So if I do 3, like I should see like another magnitude of that, or another instance of it.
Yeah.
That makes
If you do like 16, it should be like enormous.
Yep. Well, cool. And then if I wanted to maybe like add a title or something to this, they use it's called typography, and this is where we could put in like our titles, and they have different, I think, what they call variants on this. So this is where you could say, body, caption, H1, titles, whatever. So I'll make that an H3 and just say like add blog. And you'll see we'll get that, which looks ridiculous. I'll probably move that into this box and then maybe give it like something less ridiculous. Make sense? So there's our nice ad blog. In fact, what I'd probably do is take that, and it would probably become its own component. Just have an ad blog component that we could add, within blogs or something if we wanted. And then the other thing that we have here is this blog itself. So we might want to make this look a little bit better instead of just an unordered list. So what I think it has like a nice list element here. So we could do, I forget exactly what they call that. I think it's just a list. So we can just build out like a list, maybe that looks like this, and then maybe put like a little icon next to it or something. So the nice thing about this is you can click this little button to see the source, and then it actually gives it to you in TypeScript as well. So you could come in here and see exactly what it has. So we could go ahead and build that out. So I don't know if that's worth doing together, or if you guys want to kind of shift gears and go to something else. But that's just kind of like a very basic intro to like a UI framework. There's a bunch of them, right? There's this Material UI one. There's one called Ant D. I think that's pretty popular. Bootstrap has a couple different flavors. There's like React Bootstrap and a couple different options for that. So yeah, kind of maybe push it back to you guys. Where do you want to go? Do you have any more conversation around any of this stuff? Are you liking what you're seeing? Does it seem too tedious? Does it seem normal, what you're used to? Is it all brand new?
I think it's been fine. I have no complaints. What would you suggest? Where do you want to head next, or do you have any thoughts based on the that document you put together or anything like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Let me pull that up real quick. I kind of created a new one for today. I'll just kind of grab a copy of it because it's like opening in Teams here. That's not working. Let's see. Maybe. So anyway, the idea, today we're going to kind of make calls to the API with cores, get all blogs, create blog. We did that. Add the Material UI library. We did that. I thought another thing that we could do, doesn't have to be today, but do some sort of build pipeline to kind of put all this together and like make sure everything that builds and runs, like in Azure DevOps or something.
Yeah, that sounds good to me if we think we have the time.
Yeah, we could probably knock some of that out. Yeah, I don't see why not. I am a little unfamiliar with GitHub though and how you do that, so it's going to be a little bit of a learning experience for both of us, for all of us. So what I'm going to do is I'll commit this, and we'll just say added Material UI, and I'm going to push that. And then what we'll do is, if we get the build pipeline working, we'll get a build there, and then we'll set up maybe a continuous integration where we can run that when the pull request finishes. So let's make this full screen. Can you guys see this okay? Is that a little bit easier?
Yeah.
I think what we can do from within here is set up, you can set up an Azure DevOps instance and link your GitHub account into it. And I've only read about that, but I haven't done that. So if anybody has done that that's on the call, I am certainly up for suggestions there. Well, let's see if we can figure it out. I think I'm going to create this pull request, but don't do it yet because I think I saw it in here earlier. Sorry guys, I'm struggling finding what I'm looking for. There was a way to add like extensions into this, and I thought it was right here. Let's go up to the settings and see if we can get it a different way. GitHub services have been deprecated, or GitHub apps. Well, I don't want to waste a ton of time, but I thought there would be like a real simple way of doing that.
I think you might be able to do it from Azure DevOps.
Yeah, no, I definitely could, but I think you can do it through here, and it's going to link it, and it'll actually create like a new DevOps instance for us. If I was in my DevOps account, I can make a public repo there, and then just, but at some point I have to come back and link it here to get like the CI to work, I think. Oh, man. I wonder what that does. It's not what I want. Yeah, I'm super familiar with it within the DevOps world, but not as familiar in the GitHub world. I really thought within here there was a way that you could set that up. Well, maybe we can try to do it the other way. So we did at one point create this Foxhound project out here that I made public. So I'm going to come out here and see if we can figure it out through here. So what I want to do is say I want to create a pipeline. We could do this through YAML. I am not as familiar with doing that, so I'm going to switch to the classic editor for now. But that is something I'd like to circle back and try to get more familiar with. So here we can say GitHub, connection name, we can call it Foxhound. And I will log in and link the two accounts together. So here we can pick this, and this is new to me. I haven't done this. And we'll say master, and we'll say continue. But what we can do is set up building our API, and we can set up building the UI. So that used to give us a nice little starting point. I guess you don't get there anymore. No, I guess you do. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll say, okay, we're going to pull from GitHub, pull all that in. We want to restore everything. So this is just going to be restore everything from NuGet. We're going to do a build. We're going to run all of our tests. And I'm not going to run a publish in this one. So that should be enough to get all of that working. So let's see if we can run one. See if we queue it up and it works. It's going to run on a Linux box. Sure. So we'll see what happens. Any questions on that? Have you guys been using the pipelines at work a whole lot? I know some of you have.
More for integration, less for delivery deployment. I'd like to get there at some point.
Okay. Yeah, if we wanted, if we keep having some more sessions here, we can definitely get all this like deployed out to like Azure or something. It might be something interesting. I know we talked about that a little bit. So we'll just kind of let this go for a minute. Any questions or any other discussion while that's just we're watching this thing run? So you can see there it restored all of our NuGet packages, it ran a build, it ran all the tests, and everything finished. So if we were to go back here, I think you get, here's the nice test. It ran all 17 of our tests. I don't have code coverage enabled, but we could see our code coverage if we had that. So the last part of this that we need to do is we want it to build our React app. So I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to rename this, and we'll just call it just Foxhound CI. And then we're going to add a couple of steps in. We're going to add an npm install step, which will just run npm install, but we want to tell it, hey, where does that package JSON live? And here you can see our entire thing, and we know that lives in this client directory. So that's going to kind of be the working folder for the npm install. We want to then run parcel as well to make sure that everything builds. So I'm just going to run a command line for this. And I do believe I'll need to set the working directory as well. So where is all that going to run from? Well, it's going to be in the client folder. And what am I going to run here? npx parcel. I'm going to go copy that from here. More or less going to be this. And then you can give it a couple other things. I think I can say, like, I don't want it to do the minification. And then I think I need to run build. I think that's the right syntax. There's parcel build that source. So are you guys familiar with the difference between like npm run and then like what npx does? And I might butcher this, so if somebody knows it a little bit better, feel free to jump in. But the idea is npm run would be anything in your package JSON that you would want to run in the script section. And npx will actually search all of your node modules that are installed. And then that's kind of a way of running any of the command line options or executables within node modules. So here we're going to say go find parcel. We want to run the build command. And what's the parameters there? The source is going to be that index HTML, and then any other switches that I would want to give it.
So maybe I had this wrong. I always thought npx actually pulled from npm and used that package as a one-off so that you didn't have to install it globally. Chris might know the answer to that.
npx is mostly used to run scripts located in node modules, but it has a few other uses, including running commands from a specific version of a package.
Maybe I was wrong.
It might do that. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on it.
Chris said it does both, so there you go.
Okay, there you go. So anyway, that should work. So I'm going to just kind of save and queue another one of these. Actually, what I'm going to do in this case, I'm going to disable these couple of steps just so we don't have to watch them run, and then I'll come back and re-enable it. What I'm interested in though is back in here to get that to run and link that in here. I know there's a way to link it kind of the other direction, right? So this is going to do an npm install. I'm going to let that go for a second while I try to figure that out because that's driving me a little nuts. Just Google it.
Click on, I think the first one, and if you go to PR triggers, it'll tell you to do
Is that a thing in here?
it. That's on the right. There's no, you can do classic.
Oh, this is telling you how to do it in DevOps, right?
No, I think it's telling you how to do it with GitHub though.
I see. So this is like still within DevOps, but linking it to GitHub. Yeah, let's take a look. So this is running. So you could see npm install took 26 seconds and build React took 3 seconds and everything worked. So if this didn't work for whatever reason, you know, you broke the build or some merge didn't happen correctly, you know, here it is. So let's go back and see if we can then turn on the actual continuous integration for that. So over here in triggers, we can say enable continuous integration. Oh, you can do pull request validation here as well. That's pretty slick. So it is running all this for us. So the difference here, my understanding is, if I enable continuous integration here, anytime the pull request is finished, this build will run and tell you if there was any problems. But that being said, then the code is already in master and it's broken in master. Where the pull request validation is any time that there's a pull request into master that this build has to succeed before you can actually commit that into master and complete the PR, which I kind of tend to prefer because then you don't end up with bad code in master that can be prevented. I don't know if others on the call how you've handled that. I'm not as familiar with it within GitHub, but within Azure DevOps, like we do at work, it's pretty straightforward. But it looks like that this is doing the same thing. For now, I'm going to keep on this one though, and I want to see when I complete that PR if it kicks itself off. You can come back and look at it. And then there's other things you can do in here. You can schedule them and things like that. All right, so let me re-enable all these again. Save this. I'm not going to queue one up. And now that we have our continuous integration trigger on, let's see if it runs. So if somebody wants to go, if it hasn't already, approved that PR. Just a quick review, we didn't do a whole lot. There's probably some more work to do here too, to be honest. All right. What do I have to do? Tim, it looks like you did it, but I'm not seeing it show up here.
I thought I did. Let me see.
Did you do? Tim, I think you did the comment at the bottom. What you want to do is hit where it says review required.
That's what I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like
Let me try again.
Let me check.
It says he approved the changes. It's interesting.
Did he accept as a contributor?
Maybe not.
Maybe that's it.
No.
I failed.
Geez, Tim.
I got it, John.
So now when I come over here and I click squash and merge, confirm. So that should have merged into master and then back over in DevOps. At some point here, we should see one of these. Yep, so there it is. So here it is running. So that's kind of nice. So we can see if our new changes broke anything.
Question.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure. So when you build on a pull request, it does a pre-merge, right? Is that correct?
In DevOps, what it actually does is like on the server somewhere, it creates like another location for all that and like merges it and then runs the build on that. Why I was hesitant on turning this on in here is because I saw, I'll go back to it under triggers, and I said enable this. It said build pull request from forks of this repository. So it must create like a fork of it, and then run it, and then maybe delete it.
I think. No, I don't know about that, but okay. But the build, so it does do a. If we just talk about Azure DevOps strictly, forget
Yep.
GitHub, it does pre-merge everything and build it. It's not like if you didn't pull from master before you push that it's building with just your changes.
Right. So like to be super. Sorry, go ahead.
I just said it should be building with your changes integrated in.
That's exactly right. It will take whatever feature branch you're working on, as if it was merged into master, and then build the whole thing to say, hey, did this work? And I think behind the scenes what it does is it like creates some location on the build server where it does that merge, and then has those files sitting there and then runs the build off of that.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thanks.
But with GitHub, I'm not entirely sure what that's going to do, so I might just leave it like this for now. So let's see, if we go back to the summary, that probably is finished. So you can see it just took a minute. And everything passed here. All of our tests finished. So everything's good. Here's a couple of warnings we're getting that I can go fix. One of the other interesting things that I've done in the past is in here you can add in the pipeline for the .NET build, you can say treat warnings as errors. So if you don't want any warnings in your project, especially when you have like the static code analysis that we turned on, that's where we're getting some of these things from. It kind of enforces everybody to deal with those warnings because it's kind of like a broken window syndrome. If you start seeing a bunch of warnings and there's really no consequences to that, you might not fix them. So, then when you're doing your PRs and stuff, you don't necessarily have to look at that. You can just say, hey, this failed. That's one of the nice reasons to run the pre-merge continuous integration, because then you can see real quick, like, hey, I got some fixes and I can go fix it real quick and commit a couple maybe styling things that I might have missed. Other than having that get into master, right? And then trying to deal with it after the fact. So those of you that aren't familiar with that stuff, is that relatively straightforward? Looking at everyone on the call, I think everyone's probably seen that to some extent. Okay. Well, we have scheduled a half hour left, and we can end early. We could keep doing some stuff. We could discuss how we could kind of do some work by ourselves if people are interested in that, like taking a small piece of this and going to actually build out part of the API or part of the UI or whatever it is you feel like doing. What was that? If someone said something, I didn't hear.
Sorry, I said I would like that.
One of the things, when we were working on our previous project back at work, I was just about to get into the UI stuff. So UI would be something I'd like to start working on if possible.
Okay. So how about that? I'm not sure it's like really worth like starting any kind of other topics or anything at this point in time. But if we do want to like, for those of you that are interested in maybe like building some of this out and actually getting something that, works and looks nice and functions, we can stay on the call and then kind of maybe talk out and maybe even add some issues or stuff into GitHub that we can like assign out if that's of interest. Or we can spend the last half hour kind of discussing anything that we've done or what we might want to do in the future. Kind of leave it up to you guys on this one.
Yeah, John, just on the error, like with the Axios, the regenerator,
Yep.
from what I can see, I think what's probably happening, and this is why I was getting confused with, like, I think the parcel and the TypeScript. So your TypeScript is translating to ES 2018.
Right.
However, parcel is probably translating even to a lower version. And so based off of what I've seen online, it looks like there's some API called regenerator dot something that was used whenever you're using generator or async for older browser compatibility.
Okay.
And so that is where the issue kind of is. So
that's why the polyfill is needed then.
Yeah, so I don't know how you tell if it's just a bug in parcel or if there's a way to tell it, like, don't go that low of a level.
Yeah, so what it does, I believe what Parcel Bundler does is it uses Babel somewhere under the hood, and you can create your own Babel config, and then you could still take full control over all of that. But you're probably right; the default might not be pointing to a thing that actually specifies async await is enabled, like one of the ES versions.
Yeah, so that's why you need the polyfill, I think, is because it's translating it to such a low. It's assuming the target is so low that you need that polyfill, I guess, basically for that library.
Yep.
And
so my guess is what they do, like the Parcel Bundler kind of touts itself as like a zero configuration bundler, right? And we really haven't done any configuration for it. The only configuration we've really done is for TypeScript itself, right? But it does, it's, if I had to guess here, it's probably saying, yeah, I'm going to target something lower so I can support the most people out of the box with no configuration. And then if you want to kind of opt into some of these features, you got to either mess with the Babel configs or add some of these polyfills.
Yeah, and I think Parcel also reads from environment variables as well. So yeah.
It does, yeah. You can do like .env files. It uses like the like that whole ecosystem and infrastructure as well.
Yeah, and did you find the throttle? I had a couple phone calls and I had to step away, but did you find the throttling on the network tab?
Fine. Oh no, where was that? Did we find that?
Yeah, if you open up developer tools.
Okay.
If you go to networking.
Okay.
And you see where it says online right next to disable cache, there's like a drop down.
Oh, look at that.
So you presets, and then you can do add custom. If you go there, it'll take you to the throttling thing, and you can add a custom profile.
Interesting. So like I can say, really slow and give it like a
1K a second, probably.
Yeah. Can I just set like a 3,000 second latency?
Yeah.
Interesting. So then what if I get back out of here, I can now select that. And then when I come here and insert or refresh this, loading. There it is. That's really slick.
Cool.
Yeah, that's really slick. Oh, everything's taking forever here to load, but.
And there's also, I don't know if you notice too much, since we don't really do a whole bunch of mobile, that viewport thing
Yeah.
next to the, if people don't know, you can actually just have it render like different environments.
I use this sometimes when I want to see like what it might look like on somebody that has 1280 by 800. There's or
Right.
I'm sure there's still some people at work that might have something like that. Like, hey, how would this look for them, right?
And they used to have presets for that too, I think, for like iPads, and I don't know if it's under that drop down or if they just kind of got rid of the presets, but
So here's nice low end mobile. There's another way that you can kind of do that. Interesting. Yeah, you can pick here. Is that what you're saying? Like, hey, if I don't know what kind of iPhones we have at work, but if we say we have these kind of iPhones, here's the actual like what it would look like on an iPhone, which is nice. Good stuff. Anyone have anything else? All right. Is it worth? I got kind of one. Sounded like Mike, you were interested in maybe working on some of this kind of on your own. Is there anybody else that's interested in that and kind of building this out?
Yeah, I would be.
Okay, so how about this? If you're interested, stay on the call, and we will take the next 20 minutes and kind of lay out these issues that we want to build, and figure out maybe like what we want that domain to look like and stuff, and then maybe try to divvy some of that up. If you're not interested, no worries either. And I guess before anybody drops though, do we want to do any more live coding sessions? Is there any other topics we want to cover? I know, Ryan, you were talking about doing a GraphQL one at some point, which I think folks might be interested in. I definitely would be.
Yeah, me too.
I would be.
So maybe the next one of these live ones we can do. Ryan, I don't know if you want to, take some time to prepare anything, or if you just want to do it live. It doesn't matter to me.
I can do it whenever if people are interested. So if not, that's fine too.
How about Thursday? What's everyone's calendars looking like Thursday? Maybe like 10 to 12 Thursday?
That works for me.
Works for me.
All right, I'll set that up, and then maybe we'll add some GraphQL to this, and I think we can have those sitting side by side, right, Ryan? Like we can do the kind of REST way that we've been doing, and then we can add GraphQL as like another option.
Yep.
Makes sense. All right. So we'll do that for the next live one. So for those of you that are interested in working on some stuff here, how do we want this to work? I think this is where we want to figure out what the UI looks like, what that API looks like exactly what we're building. I know for now we're building this little blog engine, which I think is useful as a nice training exercise. Maybe we can bring it back into the fence at the end of the day. We can figure that out later. So throw out some ideas.
Maybe like a nav bar, or like a sidebar with like different links and stuff like that.
I like it. So we will say just site navigation.
Yeah. I can build that component.
Okay. So what are we going to add here? We're going to say add navigation using Material UI.
Yep.
Okay. And we don't even have to do like we're gonna have to get into like React Router a little bit too, like how the routing works. But if you want to try to take that on, feel free. If not, if you just want to get like the layout and UI, feel free. Just kind of wherever we get.
All right, cool.
So I think I can assign people here. Nice.
Sweet.
I know one that I've kind of wanted to do. I'll create is creating the content in Markdown and then seeing the live render of that Markdown for like maybe like a post or something like that. So does that make sense, everybody? Like what we would do is like have like a markdown editor, and that's how you would write the blog post, and then we could see live like what that would look like, and then we would save all that markdown to the database, and then when we pull it back, like that's how we would like format your blog and how we would go look at it.
That sounds cool.
Okay. Well, I don't even know if I'll do the save to a post. I might just do the editor portion of it, and then we can figure out, or somebody else can even take like creating a post and all that kind of stuff. What else? So looking at the couple API calls that we have so far is like we have the get all blog. So this is kind of a mess right now. Somebody could take the ad blog and like, pull it out into its own component or something. Maybe clean that up a little bit. I kind of want it to be, something that you're interested in. I don't want to just like randomly assign stuff to people.
I can take that, John. Give me the breakout one into its own component.
Okay. Anyone else interested in any pieces of this? Maybe somebody can take a nice listing of all the blogs that are there and just kind of have a page that shows them all. That might be a good landing page where you could like pick which one you want to go to.
I could take that one.
Is that Mike?
Yep.
Who are you in here, Mike?
Doesn't look like I'm listed. I should be MD Burger.
I didn't see myself either. I wonder if that's because we didn't accept the contributor. I don't know if it was an email or something. I don't remember seeing it, but
If there's something, yeah, I definitely didn't accept anything. Let me quick.
You should be able to do it in GitHub somewhere.
yeah, I couldn't find it. I didn't spend too much time, but
Here, I'm gonna paste these in the. So that's actually you guys in the chat. You both should be able to use that.
Okay.
While they're doing that, anybody else interested in grabbing anything?
I don't know if it'll be something we need right away, but maybe some kind of admin module to handle users or something like that, or contributors versus viewers and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I'd given that some thought as well. That's interesting on this side, how we're going to handle that, right? Like, how do we want to handle authorization or authentication in general? Like, we could, it would be rather easy and maybe somewhat interesting to, like, use your Gmail account or something and, use, like, OpenID to build all that out, which might be more than you were trying to get into.
I don't have a good grasp on that right now. Maybe we can just add. I don't know if we need to, assign it right now, but maybe some kind of authentication, and then along with it, and the module to register and whatnot. I don't know if it's the right time to do that. There might be a bit more involvement for that, but
Yep.
at least we can get it in there.
I was gonna say like authentication. Yeah, that's a good thought. I mean, we could certainly like build out like an admin dashboard or anything. I'm not sure what it would do at this point in time, unless we just kind of like like without kind of having that authentication in place, like we can add names and things, but there would be no way of like checking that you are that person.
Sure.
Anything else? Does anybody want to do maybe like if you have a blog already, like just adding a post, even if it's just a simple title and just some dummy content for now?
Yeah, I mean, I can take that on. This is Tim.
Okay. Again, I'm not trying to make like, you know, if you don't have time for any of this, it's obviously not top priority of any kind, but more of like a learning experience.
I don't know if time is quite an issue right now.
I think you're probably right. I know I've enjoyed doing this a little bit more than just like staring at videos all day. I mean, some of the videos are good, but I get burnt out a little bit.
Yeah, I'm getting to that point myself.
Yeah. So, Mike, it looks like you accepted.
Yep.
There it is. Okay. So, I mean, that's interesting. I think as we all work on this, you know, you kind of see the intricacies of working with like multiple people and the different conventions that we end up with. And I bet at the end of, you know, a few days of us building some of this stuff out, we're going to find nice ways to go refactor some of that and turn them into, you know, just some cleaner code in general. Especially the API stuff. What we did in there today was like pretty rudimentary. We can make like a custom use API hook or something that might be more appropriate. Or see where we end up with GraphQL too. Anybody that's not assigned anything that wants to be? You know, I'm sure we can find. You know, once we have a post or something, you know, we could do like the add comments to a post. Maybe I'll just create that, even if we don't assign it right now. And then, you know, view comments on a post. All that kind of stuff. Probably one more that I can think of is like edit blog, which you might want to like change owners, update title. I don't know, all the basic stuff you can think about. All right, guys. Anything else at all?
Looks good.
All right. Well, be on the lookout for some PRs, and then we can, you know, as you see the PRs come through, we could try to knock them out and maybe regroup on Thursday with Ryan, and then see where next week goes, and we can kind of continue this.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, guys. Hey, take it easy.
All right, you too.
Thank you.
Sure.